All right, so we can get started. So in the Google Classroom, so today we are going to have a lab, mainly for the lab. But we are going to, I'm just going to explain, now is the time we should start preparing for the exam. So it's just created the exam resources. So where you can go to the Google Classroom and then you see the study resources, and we have each chapter. So like different chapters that are PDF. The chapter 1 to 3 and 6 to 13 are pretty easy. So you can spend around half an hour per chapter. You should be able to finish it. But the chapter 3 and 4 are going to be a lot of resources there. But if this week and next week, if you can finish, especially this week, if you can finish chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then next week we can just finish up all the other chapters like 5 to 13. So that way we can just prepare for the exam. And we are also started pushing more exams. So basically each session, we have like some sessions we have 25 questions, but some of them are 65 questions, like that. So the more and more questions you answer, it will be good for you. The idea is, practice more exams and you will be able to pass the exam. So I'm going to put a lot of emphasis from this week and next week on studying for the exam. But these weekdays, at least try to finish chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then next week we will continue with the rest of the chapters. So weekdays, most of the next weekdays, we will have study classes like during the daytime or weekdays, and I'll send you that information. Like we can get together for a half an hour, 1 hour, going through some of the questions and how to prepare for the exam. So that way you guys will start preparing for the exam. So just go through the Google Classroom and then study this, and then you have to start taking the exam. So the first exam is due on June 21st, and then the second one is 27. So more exams, questions are coming your way. So try to answer it. If you don't get it, go back and try to do it again so that you understand the concept. So the idea is to get around 600 questions to you in different exams. So that way you will be prepared for the exam. So today Ritika is going to go through the lab, and then I'm going to get her present her laptop at the screen. So let me pass it on to Ritika there. Thank you.
Okay, guys, so, just a second. Okay, we're back and the echo should be gone. So we're going to be creating a CloudFront distribution today for our third lab. A CloudFront distribution is a web service provided by AWS that speeds up distribution of your static and dynamic web content. So this is basically used in like when you're creating a website. So the end product of today's lab should be a web link that we can use to create like a mini sort of like a static website where we can access data that we have input into our AWS console. Oh, can you guys see my screen?
Okay, now you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead. Our first step in this lab is creating an origin point of data. So this origin point of data is basically where we store the data that we're going to display on our website. So our last lab was creating an S3 bucket and storing objects in there. So we stored a text file, and that text file is going to be our S3 bucket where we stored our text file is going to be our origin point of data. So if we scroll down from our AWS services dashboard and we go to all services, go down to storage and look at our S3 tab and press that button, it should bring us to our S3 dashboard where we store our origin point of data. So you guys should already have a bucket created with an object stored in it, and that is the bucket we're going to be using for this lab. So if you haven't created a bucket yet, you can do that later, just like watch along with us, and we should be posting a video later. So if you want to look back at our old labs and create a bucket for this, you can do so after we're done. So one important thing to note when you're using our buckets is that our access shown over here, all those objects have to be public in order for us to use it in our public website. So see down here in this area, my bucket and objects are not public. Now we need to be able to change this access. So if your bucket is showing up as a non-public item, one way to change that is to click on your bucket. Now you're brought to its overview page. Go into the permissions tab and check if your public access is being blocked. Now see over here, if I go in, you can see that I have that ticked off, so I just removed that tick mark. It will ask me to confirm. Now my bucket should be public. Now, if your objects are still not showing up as public, how you can change that is, oh wait, this bucket is empty, but I'll show you in my other bucket. So save it. So if your object is still showing up as private, what you would do is if you would go to your overview page where your file is stored, press on the link, go to permissions, and change it over there in our public access settings. So now that we have a public bucket, so I'm going to be using our flight test bucket 234, we can go back to our AWS dashboard where we are going to start creating our CloudFront distribution. So in order to access that, we have to go back to our dashboard and go back to our console and go scroll down from all services to the networking and content delivery subheading, which is over here. And right below VPC, you should see the CloudFront option. So we're going to go to that dashboard by clicking the link. And over here, we're just going to click the blue button to start creating our distribution. Now, when we do this, it will show us two different delivery methods or different options. So the two methods are your web distribution your RTMP distribution. Now, what a web distribution is, it's the kind of distribution you typically see when you're looking at a website. It has the HTTP, HTTPS tag, and we'll go further into that later. And if you look over here, it will show all the different, what are they called? The different variety of options that a web distribution will have. Now, over here, our RTMP distribution, it stands for real-time messaging protocol. Now, this is going to be discontinued on AWS soon, but basically what this does is you can use this kind of distribution if you're trying to store and distribute media.
Where do I get that?
Now, examples of this would be like audio files,
You should
video
know. I
files,
explained you this.
and stuff like that. So it's better for like live streaming and like providing those kinds of files. So for our purpose, we're using a text file. So we're just going to be using our web distribution. So we're going to press the blue Get Started button over there for that option. Okay, so I believe we have like three distribution like setting sections that we have to go through. So for our first one is our origin settings. So we're going to have to choose an origin domain name. So basically what that is, it's just going to show different options when you click it. It's asking you to choose the S3 bucket that you're going to use. And so whichever S3 bucket that has the data that you want to display on your website, that's the one you would click. So I'm going to choose my RFY test bucket 234, and it should show up as my origin domain name. So our next option would be origin path. Now we're going to leave this blank for now, but basically what an origin path option is if you have a lot of objects within the bucket that you've chosen, typically you'll have different files containing the different objects.
It's not going to
so
show.
Say if you have a file in your bucket that you don't want on your website, you don't want the public to see, you have that one file, and you have another file that's like, I want to keep this as my public objects that I'm going to put on my website. So if you want to choose just the public file, you would go into your origin path and select that file that you want. So in order to set that, something I would recommend while you're doing this lab is clicking your information tab. This will give you like more of the specifics for the data you want to input into different setting tabs. And it also gives you like a lot of the definitions for the different settings. So our next one is our origin ID. Basically, this is just a description for your origin point. Yeah, basically it. So as you can see, my origin ID has the S3 tag for the S3 bucket option, and it has the bucket name next to it. So it's pretty easy. It should be automatically created as soon as you input your origin domain name. Okay, so our next option is restricting bucket access. Okay, so this is basically, how do I explain this? It's what it says in its name. It's basically controlling who can access your bucket. So what are we making again, and what is the name? Okay, so our question is asking what we're making. So we are making a CloudFront distribution. Basically what this is, it's a web service that speeds up distribution of your static and dynamic web content. So in other words, it's a tool that you can use in order to distribute your website content over the internet. So if you have a website, yeah, that's what it's called. So if you have a website that you want to, if you're creating a website, you want to have a CloudFront distribution so that you can connect your website to different web servers over the internet. Does that make sense? Yes, okay. So if you don't have an S3 bucket right now, what I'd recommend is that you follow along with us for now, and we have our different videos of the labs that we've done on our Google Classroom, and I believe also a YouTube page. So later, go back in, create an S3 bucket, and come to this video and redo the lab like that. So yeah, we're going to continue. Where were we? Restricting bucket access. Okay. So yeah, this is basically controlling who has access to your bucket, who has who has access to the information you're putting on your website. So right now we're gonna put no, but if I did press yes, over here you would have all these like sub options, which is like grant read permissions of buckets, which is what it says in its name basically, and this option 2, which is origin access identity. Now Also, look through the information tab if you're ever confused, but later in this setting process, something that's going to happen is we're going to choose whether or not to set our website so that you have to have, what's it called? Sorry, I'm having a bit of a brain fart. Signed URLs or signed cookies. So basically what this is these signed URLs or cookies contain authentication information, which basically controls if you have the correct authentication information, you can perform specific actions on the web domain. Now, we're going to go more over that later, but this is basically controlling what those what authentication information has what access to what actions. So right now we're not going to go too far into it, so we're just going to keep it as no. So basically everybody with every kind of cookie or URL can see what's in our bucket, can see not what's in our bucket, can see the information that we're distributing. Okay, and we're going to skip over these next three options. So before we move on to the next section, I know that this content is a bit more specific than our other labs. If you have any questions, just go ahead and ask them. Okay, so we are going to move on to our next settings section, which is default cache behavior settings. Now, we haven't really gone too much into caching so far, so we're not going to get too deep on this section, but I'm mainly going to go over the protocol policies within this area. So our first option is path pattern, which is already set to default. So we're going to move on to our viewer protocol policy. So for those of you who, so for this policy, it's basically asking you to choose, are you using HTTP or HTTPS? So for those of you who don't know, HTTP and HTTPS are tools used to transfer data over the web. They're protocols used by your website to connect to different web servers over the internet. Now, the difference between these two protocols is that HTTP is unsecured, while HTTPS is a secured tool. So if I do HTTP and HTTPS, basically anybody can, with these protocols, can access my website. Now, say if I choose HTTPS only, there's going to be an error message that shows up. So it says sending this value will drop any HTTP traffic. Basically what this does is it says only people with secured policies are able to access my website, basically. So that would definitely significantly drop your website traffic, as only more secured, how do I word it? Only people with more secure access can look at your files. Now, our content is just like a text file with 3 words, so it's not that important. So we're just going to keep it as all access. Okay, our next option is allowed HTTP methods. Now, these methods enable basically read and write and response access. One quote that I have seen used when describing these methods is that they grant the ability to either just read from your S3 bucket or the ability to be able to write back to the S3 bucket via your edge locations. Now, you're not going to really need to know that much super in depth about this topic for your test. If you're taking the classes after this AWS class, such as the DevOps program, or if they decide to go more in depth in later sessions, you guys will learn more about this. But for now, we're not going to go too deep into the different commands that they use. As you can see, get, head options doesn't really make sense right now. But if you are interested and you want to know, you can definitely search it up on Google. There's lists for the different HTTP methods that can be used. Okay, we are going to be skipping over this whole like object caching settings for now, and you guys will probably learn about it in a later session, but we're not really going to go over that. If you're going through, make sure to set your object caching to origin cache headers so that we don't have to do any like the customization pillars that are shown over here in the gray. So, okay, now that we've skipped over that section, our next option is smooth streaming. So what smooth streaming does is it's an option for streaming live objects. So if you remember earlier, we were talking about the RTMP web distribution, CloudFront distribution, which is the real-time messaging protocol distribution. And this is a better object that I would, SSL. Just a second, let me read through the comments.
No, that was me.
Okay, so the instructor, Robotics for Youth instructor has posted some more information in the comments in the chat section about different HTTP requirements and stuff in the chat. So if you're interested, go look over there because that will have more information. Okay, back to what we were saying, smooth streaming. Earlier, we were talking about the RTMP CloudFront distribution, sorry. That was what we used for streaming a lot of objects and media files, such as video, audio, those kinds of things. So that's definitely the better tool to use, but pretty soon RTMP is going to be taken off of AWS. So if you're using like streaming, if you want to stream a live object, you can enable this in this option. So if I press yes, I can stream like live events in my website. So for now, we're going to choose no. Our next option is restricting viewer access or using signed URLs or signed cookies. Sorry, guys, if I'm kind of speaking in gibberish, but we talked about this concept earlier when we were going over our first section of like bucket access and stuff. So just to go over it again, signed URLs and signed cookies contain authentication information which allows users without credentials to perform specific actions on a resource. So if I press yes, I'm basically adding additional layers of security to my access settings for my bucket. So again, the information we're containing is not like super important. So we're gonna press now. Now, if you were in like a business sort of setting, these options would definitely be a lot more important as you're trying to control who has access to more confidential information or which departments can access what within your website, that kind of stuff, or which departments can edit different sections of your website. So we are going to set that as no. And our next option, compress objects automatically. Yeah, that's basically, it's just if you want them to automatically compress the objects within your bucket. We're not going to go over that right now. Okay, our last option in this section is Lambda function associations. I don't believe you guys have gone over AWS Lambda that much so far, but the basic description of this function is that it allows you to run functions or execute code in response to different event triggers. So if you look over here, you can see the different events. So as soon as a viewer requests to access the data within our web domain, it will trigger a different, like, it will allow you to execute different code or different functions. We don't really have those set right now, so we're not really gonna set it. We're just gonna leave it as it is and move on to our next section. So does anybody have any questions before we move on? Because I know that was a lot, so. Okay. So again, if you're confused afterwards, just post a question under the Google Classroom post that we're going to post the video in, and we'll try to answer it. And also, like, Google is your friend. If you're confused about a definition, everything is on, you'll find like AWS website definitions, or just like definitions on like lists that people have created over the years. So those are definitely good resources. Okay, our next section, and I believe it's our last one, it's the distribution settings. So our first option in this section is price class. This is basically which countries can access your website. So like if you're a business and all of your customers are basically US, Canada, and Europe, then you can choose that option. Or if you have, if your customers are like in different continents, you can choose this option. Now, say you want to have best performance and you just want to distribute to all your edge locations all over the globe. That is the option you would select. And AWS recommends that you use all edge locations. So our next one is AWS WAF Web ACL. Let me just flip the page. This is basically controlling your firewall, as you can put it. So what this does is it blocks or allows requests, it blocks or allows requests based on criteria that you specify. So you can control that criteria in these like distribution settings. So we're not really gonna go over that. You guys are definitely not gonna have to go that in depth for the test. So we're gonna set it as none for now and skip over our alternate domain names section. So our next option is SSL certificate. Okay, I'm gonna log out. Okay, yeah, that's fine. We're almost done anyway. So I believe that the instructor posted some information on SSL certificates in the chat for those of you who are here live to look at. And basically what an SSL certificate option like determines is like which tag you're gonna use at the end of your website. So, you know, here's some examples right here. So if you use the default CloudFront certificate, you have the .cloudfront.net at the end of your website link. So like, for example, you see those websites where it's like http / or whatever, insert a name here, company name .net. So that would be like, if you wanted to choose a custom certificate, you could put your own like identification tag at the end of your, for your domain as your option for your domain. So we're gonna be using like the CloudFront domain for our specific purpose. So we're gonna choose default CloudFront certificate. So yeah, if you wanna choose a custom SSL certificate, I believe you have to input an alternate domain name. So say if I want to put robotics for youth, actually, I'm not quite sure how the custom part works, but we're not going to be using that right now. If you're taking like a business class, you're probably going to learn that. A more business-oriented AWS class, you would definitely learn more about these custom certificates, but we're not going to go over that right now. Okay, and our last set of options, supported HTTP versions, that's just like, leave it at default, because it already like provides you like the widest set of HTTP variety that you can have. Default root object, we're going to skip. Okay, logging. So let's go over logging. If you enable logging, you can, what this will basically do is it will log requests and access logs, like, sorry, I'm not wording this correctly, but this will log who is accessing your website and who's requesting to access different resources in your website. So yeah, it's basically, we'll create like a spreadsheet sort of thing for you. So if I press on, you'll see these next options open up: bucket for logs and log prefix. So this section, if you click it, you'll see my S3 buckets. Basically what this does is it just you can just choose which bucket you choose to put your logging spreadsheets into. So if I'm taking my data from my RFY test bucket 234, I can choose to put my logs for that bucket into a different bucket. So say if I chose this one, that's the bucket it would go into. Now say if I want to choose to put this in the same bucket as the one where I get my data from, I can still choose that bucket and put my logging information into a different folder, which is into my private folder that's not being distributed over the website. So say that's where the log prefix option starts to come in, actually. The log prefix is choosing which file in your bucket that the logs are going to go into. Now, if you press your information tab, it should show more specifications on how to log this file name into your log prefix setting, but we're not really going to go over that right now. For now, we're going to leave logging off. Okay. That should turn off like your cookie logging too. And our next thing would be enable IPv6. That's just your, oh, sorry. That's just like the regular IP address kind of information. And then, okay, should be our last option, which is our comments section. So this is important for like a business setting again, which is, so like if a colleague is reviewing your, if your colleagues are reviewing your CloudFront distribution, when they look at your comments, they can identify the purpose of your distribution and different functions that you want to specifically emphasize. So say this distribution is used for text files, text file display, right? And so if your colleagues go in, they can see that information and easily identify which distribution they have to be using, or which distribution they have to access. So yeah, don't need comments right now. And now that you have all your settings done, just go over it real quick and make sure you have everything done correctly. And then you can press the blue button to create your distribution. Now, before I do that, does anybody have any questions, or do they want me to go back to a section to review what we chose for our lab, what options we chose? Okay, so what we're going to do is create our distribution. Now, typically, when you're creating a distribution, it will take quite a while to process. So typically, I think it takes 20 to 30 minutes in order to create a CloudFront distribution, to have it like fully enabled and on display. So I don't think mine will definitely not be ready by the time we're done with this session, but basically what it should do, if you go into your CloudFront distribution, is when you go into your, if you press the link for your distribution and go into your general tab, down here should be the domain name. Now this is going to be the web link that you use to access that text file that we put into our bucket. So if I press Control C, and I copied it back in, right now the site can't be reached, but as soon as it would be, as soon as our distribution was processed, what should show up is the text file that we used for our website. So it would be like an AWS text file, like tagging in the corner. But yeah, right now that doesn't show up. But yeah, and I believe that is it for the lab. If you guys have any questions, just put them in the chat. Or if you are going through this again and you have any questions later, just comment them under the Google Classroom post and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Okay. So I'm gonna let the instructor share his screen so he can go over a few things.
Yeah, so just want to give you an understanding of what the cloud distribution, what we were talking about, right? So the CloudFront distribution, basically, I just wanted to give you an example. When you're ordering something in, some of these things are coming straight from the place where they are manufacturing. Some, for example, if some of the things are manufacturing in Washington, Seattle, it takes a long time to come to here, right? So basically what they will do is they will have their stores in different parts. Like, Virginia has some store, and then every state has their own store, so that every time some of the items are like ordered like a frequent orders. What they do, they will keep those items in those locations, right? So for example, if somebody from Virginia order something, and that will be distributed from Virginia instead of coming from Seattle. So the same way in the website, when you are doing a request, the request, when you ask for a request, then the web server give you back the response. The response is coming as an HTML. Sometimes it's a video, sometimes it's an image. So if, let's say, if I have a server which is hosted application, a website which is hosted in somewhere in Australia. So if I made a request, so it will take a long time for the data, the information to come to you, because it has to go through a lot of routing process, a lot of wires it has to go through. It will take more time. So what is the best way AWS came up with is, they have these intermediate places like edge locations, right? So the edge locations are the one which is near to you. Let's say Northern Virginia has an edge location. So what it does is, from Australia, all the informations are cached. Cached means it will be stored in these edge locations. That places like Northern Virginia has an edge location, and near to Texas there is another edge location. So all those informations are cached. So cached means they will be stored, so that if I am requesting a file or any information through the web, it first look in the edge location. If it is available, it will deliver to you. So if it is not there, then it will go to the server back in the Australia, wherever the server is. So edge location is basically giving you an option to deliver the information pretty fast, right? So what the CloudFront distribution you're doing is, you are setting up a way to cache those information in the edge location. And once everything is cached, so whenever there's a request coming from the user, it goes to the edge location. If it is available, it just delivers to you pretty fast. So that way, you don't need to go all the way to the server. Wherever it is, it will be distributed in the edge location. So one of the advantages, it's pretty fast. It will get delivered to you fast. But the other disadvantage, it is not a disadvantage, but is, you have to cache those information in the edge locations. So whenever the content is expired, then all the latest content will be updated in the edge locations in a regular interval. So so this is very important for if you are let's say if it's a CNN.com or any news or media, YouTube, uh, any movie, videos are coming, it's better to cache in edge location instead of coming from the main server. So it will give you the performance as well as the user experience is going to be high. So once you create the website, you create the cloud the CloudFront distribution. You don't need to worry about the AWS will take care of caching and all those stuff. So I just wanted to make you understand. I will send you a video which will explain it very clearly. And then you look at the lab and you understand what it is. All right, so you start studying from the the CloudFront, from the Google Classroom I showed. The first 4 chapters you can finish it, and next week we will continue with the rest of the chapters. All right, we'll have more quizzes and tests coming in. So I'll send you the YouTube video which will explain it very clearly. So let me send it to you guys in the chat. So just go over and watch that. It's a 5-10 minutes of video. Where is the chat? Okay. Okay, I'll put this in our Google Classroom, and this video explains this very clearly. So. All right. So if you don't have any questions, please, if you have any question, please send an email or put in the chat, and we'll have another session for that. All right. Try to finish this lab today itself. All right. I'll post this video. Thank you.